long list. Oh, we're getting there. Bing bong, ming ming mong mong mong. And we've hit the halfway point with a really good one, in my opinion. This is the book Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange. So Wandering Stars is a sequel and prequel to the book There There. So this book takes place before There There and also after There There. And the best and worst thing about this book, Wandering Stars, is that it is connected to There There. The worst is because people will not stop telling me to read There There just to make sure that I know that they've read it. Shut up, nobody cares. And the best reason is because the prequel-sequel aspect of this book gives it a very unique structure that becomes very compelling when you view Wandering Stars by itself. The first half of this book is kind of a period piece, focusing on the first few immediate generations after a massacre of Indian people. And we follow these first few immediate generations as they struggle with displacement and addiction primarily. And we follow that, and then the book has this hard cut after one of the chapters about these early generations far back in the past. And it gives this hard cut to modern day, immediately in the aftermath of the book There There. I haven't read There There, I don't really know what happens in it, but this book gives you enough to where you don't have to read it, and I would honestly encourage you not to. Because what happened is, that hard cut, and then straight into the second half of this book, leaves you with this immense sense of confusion, but also this sense of really detailed structural intent. The first half of this book is really beautiful and expansive and gliding over all, and then the second half becomes this really focused, gritty character study that reminded me of the bee sting in its willingness to be colloquial. And the cut between the two halves is so great because both halves are not made to relate to each other, either in style or in content. The first half, I don't think ever gets mentioned again in the second half. We take this hard cut and everything in that first half does not get mentioned again. In the second half, we have this increased resonance because the first half came first chronologically, and everybody in the first half are the ancestors of the second half. These characters in the first half are physically assaulted, they are massacred, they are oppressed, and then in the second half, they are not in the same way. It's not the same thing that happens to them, but you see the aftermath of these issues represented in different ways in the second half. They have all of these financial troubles and all of these mental troubles, and the fact that there's that hard cut in the middle forces you to relate all of that back to the past. You identify the systematic oppression of these people in the way that the book is structured. It's fucking brilliant. And the annoying thing is that I can't be entirely sure that the author would have thought of that if they hadn't written that book first. The fact that this is a sequel is really frustrating to me because people will only treat it as a sequel, and if you read this book by itself, it becomes really powerful. To talk about both halves separately now, I liked the first half much more than the second half on like a purely writing level. I loved the changes in perspective. In the first half, there's a section that turns into second person, and it's kind of like someone writing a letter addressed to their daughter, I believe. But over time, as this section progresses, the second-person narrator becomes more and more omniscient, and it becomes harder and harder to tell who's talking. It's really fucking cool. The writing is beautiful, the characters are unique, and the very first chapter following the person who survives that massacre is an amazing opening. That whole first section of that character, who at the end has to leave his family, or chooses to leave, I thought all of that was amazing. What an opener. The second half of the book was still good, but not as great as the beginning. It didn't hit that same height. In this second half, we focus more on the child characters in this family, and there's a lot of reference to like popular culture and gamer shit, and these teenagers, I think, address the difficulties in their situation in a way that felt realistic to how teenagers would react. But even during the modern day writing with the children characters that I was not like in love with, I was still propelled by the chapter by chapter structure of the book. After Orville really fucks up, we then get a perspective from his friend Sean, I believe, who's a lot older and looking back on it. And he talks about addiction in a really candid way at that point in the book, which is like the kind of perfect time to do it. And in that chapter, that character Sean does sound older than he did, which I thought was really solid writing. If the book didn't have that first half, I would find it sort of slightly above average, but not particularly interesting, especially in its deconstruction of addiction, maybe. But with that first half, it creates this really interesting framing where everything is being reflected back into the past in some way. For example, example, the final letter in the book is given resonance because it feels like something that the main character in the first section of the book would have written because he did a similar thing in abandoning his family. So you kind of feel these parallels through the book even if they're not specifically mentioned. It's subtle and it's not harped on about, and that is a rarity on this fucking long list. So yeah, the structure of this book is this amazing crutch for everything else to rest on. And I found the rest of the book well written, colloquial, not especially deep or interrogative, but still really solid. And with that structure, it becomes something I think really special. I'm worried that the judges won't give this the win because it is a sequel. I hope they can look past that and see this book as, like, what it is, as an individual piece that's very interesting. So far, I reckon this is the best book on the long list, and I've read 8 of them, and will keep powering through until I find something better. Thank you so much, bye!